Hey everyone, Anthony here. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we have a really great conversation with a friend of mine, Keren Kozar. Keren is the senior people and culture partner at HiBob, which is an HR tech platform. She's also a relatively newer mom, so I thought she brought a really great and fresh perspective to the whole working parent conversation. If you're a new working parent or you're about to be a working parent, especially a mom, I really think this conversation is going to give you a lot of value. I appreciate you listening. Let me know what you think of the show, and if you would click the follow button, leave me a rating. That would mean the world to me. It's the best way to help grow the podcast. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents Podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. My guest today, she is the senior people and culture partner of HiBob, mother of one. Ladies and gentlemen, Keren Kozar. Keren, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to talk to you today. So first things first, we'd like to jump in, just a quick background on your career.
Yeah, so I am the senior people and culture partner at HiBob, which is the company behind the HR tech Bob, which provides modern HR solutions for companies. I have a decade of HR experience in a variety of different industries. Most recently, I was the head of HR at a digital marketing agency where I got to build the people function from the ground up there. And that's the role I was in when I had my daughter, Ada, who's now 2. And I've been at HiBob for about 3 months now.
Awesome. So you mentioned you have one daughter who's 2 years old now?
Yeah, she turned 2 at the end of March. And it's worth noting, I also have a dog who's 4 because I parent him too.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure that's it's usually the first step is the dog, and then the child comes next, right?
That is how we did it. Yeah.
Yes. Do you feel like your background in HR informed the way that you've parented it all so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that my philosophy around human resources is that I am a coach, I am a support system for the employees at the company as they navigate their careers. And so much of that is active listening skills and patience and really taking an objective look at what can be fairly complex situations. And I use all of those skills when it comes to parenting my daughter. I think you have to have a level head and also recognize that people are individuals. They're motivated by different things, they respond in different ways to different situations. And understanding that about people helps you just be a better parent and understand your kid as an individual.
How about the other way around? Do you feel like you've changed the way you're an HR person at all since you've become a mom?
I would say everything about you changes when you become a mom. So, yeah, absolutely. As a professional, I've changed. I think less maybe in my career as an HR professional and more just holistically as a professional, I've changed.
Like just the way you think about your career in general, more so than the way your day-to-day career is?
How I think about my career, how I structure my day, how I interact with, my husband, all of it changes when you become a parent, and who you were before you go on maternity leave is a completely different person than who you are when you come back. And a lot of it's actually just finding who that person was and the role that they play in this new kind of life that you have.
So it's been interesting to talk to different people because some people I've talked to have been parents for a very long time. Obviously, you've been parents for a couple of years, although of course you've had the dog for 4. Don't want to discredit that background as well. But yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you had to adjust in the last 2 years. Was it what you expected? Was it something you could have planned for, or just what have you really had to change?
So there's the old adage that being a working parent feels like you're failing at both jobs, right? It feels like you're just never giving as much time as you want to each role that you play. And I don't mention that to be a downer. I mention it actually because I think that that's really useful to kind of go in understanding and giving yourself permission to sort of not be A plus all the time at both roles. And I think that that was probably the biggest adjustment that I had returning to work. I'm someone who I love what I do. I love succeeding at what I do. And it is a passion of mine. And understanding that I'm now doing 2 full-time jobs, giving myself permission to sort of not be perfect all the time at everything was really freeing in a way. And I think that new parents also, as they enter on this journey, understanding that as they go in, that giving yourself that permission is the best gift that you can give yourself because there is no way to be perfect all the time at everything you do.
I like that. I think permission to fail is so important in really anything that we do or any new endeavor for sure. It's funny though, because you can think about like failing as a parent just seems to have such higher stakes to it, right? Than like failing at, like I work in sales, right? It's like it's not as big of a worry of failure as it is in parenting.
Well, I wouldn't use the word fail, right? Like you're not going to fail. I think it's more being okay with being okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to send your kid to daycare with the 3-course organic meal. You might be 5 minutes late to a meeting because daycare was a mess that morning, like I was to this podcast recording. Like
Right.
that is okay, and neither of
Sure.
those things are failing.
Yeah. No, there is a big gap between perfection and failure, of course. That's a good point for sure. So, how do you manage some of that difference in just all your time is now taken up in two things? So, what are some things that have been helpful for juggling both things?
I think setting expectations early and often, especially when it comes to work. So for me, 5 to 8 is family time, 5 to 8 p.m. So that is when I pick my daughter up from daycare. We have dinner together as a family. We're doing bedtime routine. And prior to having a kid, 5 to 8 would have really still been working time. I mean, people are having meetings at 5:30 and 6 p.m. And you just set that expectation with your team. This is time that I'm blocking off on my calendar and actually block it off, right? So people can't just book over it freely, and also give them social permission to say, I know this is family time, but this is actually really super important that you be in attendance. And in that case, my husband and I, we pull the levers that we need to so that I can be in attendance. I think that that's really key, is actually structuring your day in a way that makes sense to do both jobs. The flip side of that is there are going to be times where I have to miss childcare things for work. I had to miss my daughter's Halloween parade once because I had a meeting that overlapped, and I had to make the decision at the time that the meeting was more important than the Halloween parade. And did it break my heart to miss it? Of course, but that's what it is. It's constantly juggling the two.
Do you think, if you go back in time, would you have missed the Halloween parade again?
I would have. I needed
Yeah.
to be at that meeting, and I'm lucky that I have a support system here where I could send my parents instead to the Halloween parade. So she didn't see mom in the crowd, but she saw Baba and Tata, and truthfully, she probably loves that even more.
And where was Alex during the Halloween parade?
So my husband works 5 days a week in an office, and he leaves really early. He leaves at 6:20 in the morning. He's back at about 4:30. So anything that is daytime or morning really does fall on me, and
Gotcha.
that can be difficult, right? Because I'm the one who has the flexibility with the job, so I do have a little bit more of rearranging going on maybe than my husband does.
Sure.
He also does pick up because he's home early enough to do that.
For those of you that don't know, Karen and I are friends. I actually went to high school with her husband, so if you want to make fun of him at all here, that's totally fine with me and his contributions to partnership. But that is also interesting, right? So do you work from home every day?
I work from home 3 days a week and I go into the office 2 days a week. And the 2 days a week that I go into the office, my dad actually comes in the morning. He picks both Ada and I up. He drops me off at the train station and then he brings Ada to daycare. So, I once heard childcare for a working parent likened to a spider web, in that it's highly intricate and highly fragile. And that's really what it is. I mean, when I have to go into the city, there are all these things that need to happen. We need to coordinate a dog walker. We need to coordinate getting my daughter to daycare, getting the train that gets me in on time so that I'm not showing up late to meetings. And 5 minutes going wrong in each direction can really be, a little bit catastrophic to the day.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with a toddler, the amount of switches that can be flipped in the wrong direction, you think it's going smooth and she wants the purple cup today and I can't find the purple cup. And before you know it, you thought you were heading out the door and you actually have a 15-minute tantrum on your hands.
Are you starting to think more about, as Ada gets older, how she sees or how she will start to see the way you approach your career and the way that you and Alex have your relationship to work? Like, is that important to you as well? Like how your kids see that?
Yeah. So I grew up in a home where my mom was the primary breadwinner. My dad was a stay-at-home dad when I was really young. And when he went back to work, he went back to work in education. So he was home a lot of the times that I was home. So my dad was the one who was taking me to mommy and me classes, which, thankfully they don't really call mommy and me anymore. My dad was the one who was picking me up or taking me to activities. And my mom had to miss a lot of stuff because of work. This was also the 90s when they were, I think, less flexible to working parents, less understanding of that. I remember she had to go to a dress rehearsal for a play that I was in once because she had to travel during the actual play. And I was devastated. And now that I'm older and a working parent myself, I understand she was also devastated. I'm sure that broke her heart. She didn't want to be missing any of these things, but she had to be able to pay for these activities and provide me with these opportunities. I wish I had advice for myself. All I can say is I'm dreading when that day comes because inevitably it will come. There will be things I miss and I will be heartbroken and Ada will be heartbroken. And the payoff will be that she will have opportunities that I can provide for her. And when someday maybe she's a working parent, she'll understand the dilemma as well. And it's just a sad little cycle, I guess.
Have you felt any, not like less ambition, but have you felt like a different approach to your career in the last 2 years? I mean, I think this is really interesting, especially for women, about how they approach their career before and after they become parents. And you've obviously been pretty successful climbing the ranks in the HR world. And so I'm curious if that's something that you've thought about differently.
Yeah. Alex is going to have a nice little giggle when he listens to this because one word I would never use to describe myself is content. I'm always looking for the next thing. I love to drive towards the next goal. And I actually met with my now boss recently to talk about my career aspirations, which I hadn't reflected on, in a while. And I found myself saying, I'm pretty content. And I actually surprised myself. Do I want to climb the ladder to the next role? Do I want to go back to a head of HR role in the future? Absolutely. And I want to do that when my kids are a little bit older. I still love what I do. I'm still highly driven and I'm going to keep climbing that ladder. It's just going to look a little different, I think. And I don't feel like I'm sacrificing my career in that. I still feel like there is so much to be accomplished in the role that I'm in and the level that I'm at. And it affords me the flexibility to maybe, with what I was talking about before, miss a little bit less of Ada's activities.
Yeah, we were talking before we pressed record about my wife as a principal and how I'm really curious to see how she approaches her career after she becomes a mom, because she has been so ambitious and was a teacher and then assistant principal and is now principal of a high school. So it'll be really interesting to see if she feels the need to keep aspiring for more, or she does kind of have some more contentment that you're talking about.
And my husband and I have a very egalitarian marriage. I mean, if I did want to go after everything that I want to go after, he would be there to support me 100%. It's really about deciding, what the priorities are.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your father being a stay-at-home dad, and when I first met my wife, and she was this really like hardworking, like badass career woman, I was actually pumped because I was like, "Oh, this is great. You work, and I'll be the stay-at-home dad one day. This is great." But then all of a sudden, now that she actually is pregnant and thinking about really being a mom, she's starting to feel like, "Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I will want to not work as hard anymore." So we'll probably still both be clocking in for a little while anyway.
Man, that is Alex's dream to be a stay-at-home dad. You guys can be stay-at-home dads together and just keep the most immaculate homes and take all the kids to the activities.
Now we're talking. This is a great plan. Okay, so we've talked about giving yourself permission to not be doing it at an A plus, and we talked about setting expectations. Any other secrets for you about being a busy working parent that has been helpful?
Support system is key. I mean, I am grateful that my parents live 15 minutes away and they really do play an active role in the childcare situation. Ada is in daycare 5 days a week, full days. So they're not subsidizing, day-to-day care, but they are helping in the morning sometimes. Once a week they pick her up from daycare, which just gives Alex and I a little bit of breathing room in that 5 to 8 window, which is nice. And Alex's parents are also fairly close. They're only 45 minutes away. So when you get that inevitable 102 fever in the morning and you actually have a day of back to back meetings, they can come down and they can help and they can watch her.
Yeah.
Not everyone has family nearby. And I think the key is just finding a different kind of support system in that case. I joined a pregnancy group, which has since become a mommy group, and it's been incredible. I mean, we are 19 strong, independent women with kids the same age. And the support, the emotional support as we navigated pregnancy and newborn age and now, the throes of toddlerhood has been great. But even the logistical support, I mean, there have been times where someone's had that sick kid and an important meeting they can't miss. And one of us will play the role that maybe my parents were playing in our life. We'll go over there and we'll watch that kid for an hour so they can take the meeting. Or if there's a transit delay, one of the moms has picked up another kid from daycare so that you just have someone who can help you when things go wrong, because there will be days when they go wrong.
So that's a local support group of people actually that live nearby?
Yep. Yeah, it was a local support group. It was run by a doula when we were pregnant. And then as the kids started arriving, it became a mom group.
So how did you found it through the doula you were working with?
Yeah, I found it locally through the doula.
That's cool.
And it's just a lot of fun too. I mean, the first Thursday of every month, we go out, we leave the kids at home, we get drunk at a restaurant nearby. It's kind of great.
Can't argue with that. That sounds like a nice day out. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot too about childcare and where my parents are. And we have her parents in Connecticut, my mom in North Jersey, and then my dad in Staten Island. So I'm trying to like triangulate the three and where so Manhattan's actually the best for all three at the moment. So we have to kind of figure out where next, where we could get access to all three of them. So that'll be interesting too. What about time for yourself? Do you have any advice for self-care, or has that looked different in the last couple of years?
There's a fun little debate going on. I think there's like a meme that says a shower is not self-care, a shower is hygiene. And my friends and I had a bit of a laugh about that. And then kind of a heartfelt debate too, because sometimes a shower is self-care and that's totally fine. And this expectation that self-care needs to be, a 2-hour massage and pedicure that you take on the weekends sort of sets the bar too high. I think finding what matters to you and then making time for that, and it can be small. And especially when your kids are little, give yourself permission for it to be small. For me, a lot of times that's an afternoon jog. So I'll block off on my calendar half an hour and I will go for a run. And it's no different than going for a walk around the block if I'm in the office. I find that to be so therapeutic. I don't do it with headphones, and sometimes I'll process, difficult or complicated work situations, or maybe I'll have the Bluey soundtrack on repeat in my head, whatever, wherever my mind goes that day, it's okay. And then I also think realizing that it's okay to miss things sometimes. And so I'll explain this. My daughter's in swim class. She loves it. She goes every Saturday, and it's cute, right? Like, it is cute to see her splashing around. And then I sort of had this epiphany one day, and I'm like, it's cute to see her splashing around, and every Saturday she's splashing around. And does she love seeing me there? Yes. But I'm really just sitting on the sidelines while Alex is in the pool with her. And I realized I can go take a workout class during this time, or I can sit at home in silence, and that's okay. Once I realized it was actually okay to miss the swim class, I found this whole 2-hour window on a Saturday that I now kind of just get to use for me.
It sounds like a lot of what's been helpful for you is expectations with yourself, or just like giving permission to yourself. It sounds like maybe there's certain notions in your mind of like what you're supposed to do, or like what it's supposed to look like. And then as soon as you just let yourself let go of those things, it seems like things get a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And realizing that your kids love you. And, anytime I sort of say offhand that I'm a bad mom, and it's always for something so stupid when you realize, I'll say it to Alex, like, oh, her entire lunch today is beige. I'm such a bad mom. And he's like, shut up. Shut up. You're not a bad mom. You're an excellent mom. And the amount of times that we say that to ourselves as mothers, oh, I did this tiny, minute thing that really doesn't impact my kid at all. I'm such a bad mom. Now that he calls me out every time I say it, I've stopped saying it. And once you stop saying it out loud, you stop saying it to yourself too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really key, is just giving yourself permission to be okay.
Yeah. We got to give a shout out to my man, Alex. Sounds like he's doing a good job over there.
Oh, he's a great dad and a great husband.
That's great. That's great. I actually would like to hear a little. I haven't talked to anybody else about the dog to kid thing, and I would like to chat a little bit about that. We have a dog. It actually lives with her parents now, but still in our lives, and love to hear a little bit about how does your priorities shift a little bit, maybe away from the dog, and also just dog to baby interactions.
Okay, so our dog is He's 4 years old. His name's Maestro, and we adopted him in June of 2019. Man, I could do a whole podcast about dogs too and the dog to kid interactions, but I won't do that. That's not the purpose. What I will say is there's a really, really great Instagram account called Dog Meets Baby that I highly recommend. And essentially, what it focuses on is dog behavior with kids and how what a lot of people think is cute can actually be a dog expressing anxiety or stress. And learning that well before Ada arrived was really eye opening. And we were fully prepared on how to introduce our newborn baby to this animal who lives with us. You know, dogs, they're not babies, they're animals, and they have a different way of communicating and showing stress. And understanding that is quite key to being a good dog parent. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is it is sad, right? Like for a lot of people who have a dog, they're kind of that quote unquote first kid. And some people are who are listening to this are rolling their eyes and some people are nodding their heads and everyone's different. You know, in our case, we love Maestro a hell of a lot, probably more than we should. We don't love him more than our daughter. And so you just kind of make time when you can make time. So, for example, after Ada goes to bed, it's full on Maestro snuggle time. He's on the couch with us, he watches TV with us, we play with him. They're now at an age where they can play together as well. That's been really key. So she can kind of do tug of war with him. The biggest change is that my tolerance for his shedding has gone down so much. I think that's she goes to daycare all the time covered in dog hair. And when we spent a lot of this talking about giving yourself permission, that's the one thing where she has literally taught herself how to use a lint roller now, and she's 2 years
Oh
old.
my God, that's funny. It's just interesting to hear about you love this dog so much, and then you're like, oh, like now I have this. Obviously, you're really excited to have a child, but it's like it takes away from the love that you give for the dog, and it changes the dynamic of who you're caring about in the household. I think that that's always something interesting to address. And then having the dog interact with the baby, I think, is really interesting. Our dog is a pit bull, and he's just a little rambunctious little guy, and so I think I don't really know. we're really not sure yet, like how to what degree he'll be interacting with the baby.
Yeah, like I said, our dog is a complicated rescue. We've worked with trainers and behaviorists, and he's actually not kid friendly with anyone other than immediate family. So he's totally fine with Ada, but when time comes for us to have play dates at our house, I actually don't know what we'll do. We'll have to figure something out. It adds a complicated element to parenting that I didn't anticipate. And I wouldn't give Maestro up for the world, but it adds a level of stress to parenting that I think people who don't have dogs or people who have extremely well-behaved cuddly dogs might not understand or identify with.
Okay, we're going to pivot into Keren's advice corner. Okay, I'm going to ask you a few areas of advice. You ready?
Pivot away from dogs.
Moving away from dogs for now. Yeah, well, maybe we'll circle back. Okay, so what advice would you have for somebody that wants to get into HR?
Be okay with starting at the entry point. HR is one of those fields that it's amazing if you can study it in school, but you don't have to study it in school. And so many HR professionals haven't. So you can subsidize with certifications and LinkedIn learnings and, a variety of external resources while you simultaneously learn on the job. So I say be okay with starting at the entry level point and working your way up. Network like crazy. HR professionals are the friendliest people you're going to meet. Like, they love people. They love networking. So go to the conferences, meet people, and then leverage that network when the time comes.
What advice do you have for someone who's about to be a mom but still wants to have their career?
Read the fifth trimester. I'm really happy that I did that on my maternity leave. It puts things in perspective, it gives tangible advice, and it normalizes a really, just complicated transition. Talk to your partner, keep an open dialogue about what it means to be a mom and a professional. Make sure you're on the same page and find a support network that you can use to navigate those difficult days. It's 2023. The idea that you can't have both or that they need to be separate is so outdated. I remember one time I had to make a job offer to a candidate while I was in the car, and the only time that I could do it was when Ada was in the car, and I was literally on the phone with this candidate while Ada was I want to say singing, but the reality is that she was actually just screaming Twinkle Twinkle Little Star the entire time that I was making a job offer. And I don't know. I mean, maybe before kids I would have been embarrassed by this story, but the truth is it just is what it is. Like there was a kid in the car and it made the candidate giggle, and if anything it humanized my company as well.
Sure. I'm definitely going to get my wife that book. So I guess is like the fourth trimester is like the newborn era, and then the fifth trimester is the return to work phase. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Cool. I like that. What is the best advice you ever received?
The best advice I ever received was seek to understand, not to be understood. I use that in my work, I use it in my marriage, and especially now that Ada's verbal, I use it with Ada. She gets upset about the littlest things, or you know what? Not even the littlest things. In my mind, they're little, but in her eyes, they're not. And so understanding where she's coming from rather than forcing my own perspective on her has been really nice as a parent.
What's advice you give to your former self?
Start therapy sooner.
That's great advice for
Yeah.
everybody.
My mom and I were just talking about this, and I was telling her that I think therapy is probably the biggest difference between my generation and her generation,
Yes.
and that it's not only widely accepted, it's widely encouraged. And her generation, I think, was more of go to therapy when something's broken. And our generation is go to therapy to keep it from breaking.
This conversation is so indicative of our generation because we're talking about like stay-at-home dads, career women, therapy, like all things that just our parents really weren't as well versed in.
And I actually think too, when I was young, my mom told me the hardest years of your marriage will be when you have kids, which is kind of funny to think about her telling me that because I'm pretty sure I was in high school. So I wasn't even dating my husband at the time. Maybe she was reflecting on, telling me that it was difficult with us. But I also think be okay seeing a couples therapist as well. It really is so changing to a marriage to have a kid enter the equation. You're figuring out not only who you are as a parent, as a working parent, but a partner also to a new working parent. There are so many dynamics that enter the scene that weren't there before. And having a third person to talk to about it can be really, really helpful and really healthy for a marriage.
Totally. And just the idea of therapy as not fixing something, but just making things better or looking for areas to improve. That's great advice for yourself or for your relationship. Okay. So final question is, what advice do you have for me as a soon to be dad?
I wish Alex was on Instagram because so many, so many helpful parenting tips are on Instagram. And part of me hates that, but part of me loves it too because it makes parenting advice accessible. So, my advice to you is to find parenting accounts that are helpful to you. Big Little Feelings is a great one where you can just get these appetizers, these like snack sized amounts of parenting advice on a daily basis. And before you know it, it becomes part of your vocabulary. Now, the flip side of that is you also have to make sure that you take everything with a grain of salt and understand that it's all edited and curated. And as long as you can rely on yourself to filter out what could easily become unrealistic expectations, then I think the accessibility of parenting advice on social media platforms is really cool.
Love it. Again, indicative of our generation where there's the Instagram accounts that can help us be better parents. Okay, so where can people go to learn more about you or connect with you or anything else that you want to share or promote?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Keren Kozar. It's Keren, so watch out for that sneaky E. And like I said, I'm the senior people and culture partner at HiBob, which is the company behind the HR platform Bob.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to link your profile in the show notes as well. Keren Kozar, thank you so much. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.